Today I have the pleasure to interview Dr. Matsumoto. He is the founder of HumanTel as well as a well-known researcher in the field of nonverbal communication. Dr. Matsumoto, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Matsumoto. So let me start with this first question. How did you get interested in the field?
Well, it was a long time ago, and when I was an undergraduate at the University of Michigan in the late 1970s, which is over 30 years ago, I was asked to do a research project as part of my undergraduate studies, and I said sure. What do I need to do? And my advisor pointed me to somebody who could help me out, and they asked me what I was interested in. And at the time, I happened to be interested in how children, especially young infants and young kids, could understand what their mothers and other adults around them were thinking and feeling, even though they didn't understand the words.
Okay.
So that led me to do a little study when I was an undergrad on the perception of emotions in nonverbal vocal cues by kids, by preschoolers. And then because I happened to also do judo, I was in Japan in between my junior and senior years.
Okay.
And so I just collected data in Japan as well for my project.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was able to do a cross-culture comparison on that topic. And
wow.
That kind of started me off in this field, and I just continued to, after that, I just continued to dig and dig and dig, and I just, here we are, 30 some odd years later.
Okay, so you really started with nonverbals.
Yes, I wasn't, I wasn't particularly interested in deception detection at the time. I was just interested in nonverbal behavior and judgments and how we produce those things in general.
Okay, and how did you get to, interested in the field of deception in general?
Well, deception is an incredibly interesting topic, and anytime you study expressions in general, what you'll find is that people do a lot of different things to modulate or modify their expressions based upon social circumstances, and that becomes a very large and interesting topic to study immediately. And that one could argue that itself is a form of social deception. And so, if you study the modification of emotions and expressions, you might be, one could argue that you're studying deception to begin with. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of truth to that. I think there is a big difference, however, between deception and lying. And so, to make there's a little leap to go from the study of deception to the study of lying, I think.
Okay, so and what's the difference between deception and lying?
Well, deception would include behaviors that are intended to deceive or misdirect another person, whether they are intentional or conscious at all or not. So, for example, if we all learn from the time we were kids to mask our bad feelings toward our old auntie who gave us a gift that we don't like, which is polite.
Yes.
But it's a form of deception.
Sure. Yeah.
Just as if an animal changes color in the environment, and that the change of color is intended to deceive or misdirect another animal because it is a target of the animal, then that's a form of deception too.
Yes. True.
But that's different than an intentional act or an intentional behavior to misdirect somebody else without prior notification.
Okay.
And I think that's what lying is. I think lying is that intentional act to misdirect others without telling them that you're going to do it in the first place.
Okay.
So there's a big difference between deception and lying. And so going back to your original question, I think studying expressions and their modification in social life is studying a form of deception.
Okay.
However, studying is something a little different because of that difference in my understanding of what lying is.
And we talk about children. When do you think children start lying or deceiving?
Well, so with regard to the deception, one could argue that when an infant is having a fake cry, even though it's not hungry, to
Mm-hmm.
get the attention of the mother. One
Okay.
could argue that that's a form of deception, right?
Right, right. So that would start very early.
it goes back to one's definition of the deception, and if you go with such a definition, then certainly infants and young children start to deceive others very early.
Yes.
However, I'm not sure, and I'm not an expert on the literature on children's lying.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that there is research that shows that children is as young as 3 or 4 start to intentionally lie to others.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So I have a second question. It's about micro expressions.
Sure.
They have been widely popularized by the TV show Lie to Me, which people must ask you about all the time. Could you tell us a bit what are micro expressions, and what is your opinion about the way the TV show used them?
Oh, okay. Well, first, the definition of microexpressions. The microexpressions are brief, involuntary, unconscious, uncontrollable facial expressions of emotion that are signs of concealed or repressed emotions.
Mm-hmm.
They're a type of what we call nonverbal leakage.
Okay.
They differ from regular facial expressions in the fact that they are very quick and they occur outside of conscious awareness. Most people don't see them when they occur. People who produce them certainly don't know that they're producing them, and most of us don't recognize them even if we see something that has occurred.
Okay.
So that's what a microexpression is. Now, Lie to Me was a great show for drama and for dramatizing the science, but certainly how it dramatized the power of microexpressions and nonverbal behaviors in general and nonverbal behaviors that are clues to deception or lying was, in fact, as we all know, embellished to a large degree,
Of course.
especially as the seasons were going on,
Mm.
and they were embellished for a reason, to become entertainment and for drama. And so as a drama, it was great, to have this science highlighted in the field. It was great. On the other hand, if a viewer took the content of it too seriously, that might not be too good of an idea.
Yes, sure. Talking of which, there are a lot of myths about how liars behave and how deception looks like. Could you talk about the most common myths?
Well, sure. The most common myth, I think, is that when people are lying, they avoid looking at you.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, this gaze aversion
Uh-huh.
is generally thought to be a sign of lying, and that myth or that belief is held by many people around the world, actually, cross-culturally.
Even professionals.
Oh yes, and many professionals I encounter most every day in my professional life, in our consultation and training and our research, believe that. So, and the scientific research, there have been a number of studies that have tried to test that hypothesis that gaze aversion is a reliable sign of lying, but most studies that have tested it do not support it. And in fact, one recent study that was published about a year or two ago has showed that because liars know that myth, when they're lying, they actually look at the person more when they're answering the question than not.
As a counter
So
strategy.
Yeah, they're compensating for that myth.
Oh, that's interesting. And sometimes, there's a more elaborated theory about eye direction, like when you look to the left or to the right, it has different meanings.
Right.
Is that a myth too?
Yes. In terms of their ability to be reliable signs of lying, yes, there's no data to support that.
Okay.
Now there's a lot of data to support that gaze aversion like that may be a sign of higher cognition or mental searching, and that's okay. That makes sense. But to call them signs of lying, I think is a little stretch.
Okay. Okay. So we just talked about studies and how they can prove that some cues are reliable. Back to microexpressions. Could you talk about scientific evidence that exists and shows the link between microexpressions and detecting deception?